Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I am your guide, KAGE, the creator of all the what-ifs you see on this channel, with your suggestion of course. I hope you like the video we have today. Please comment video ideas, and subscribe if you're new. Here are the shout-outs, and I want to thank all of you for commenting, and please keep doing so. And if you can support me, please do so on my Patreon, where you can subscribe for $5 to get early updates, text what-if transcripts, thumbnails, other arts, and gaming videos. The link will be in the description, so if you can, please help out. The what if we have is part 2 of What If Naruto Was in Legend of Korra. So without further ado, let's get into this what if. Part 2, Secrets Unsealed. Naruto awoke in a cold sweat, the soft glow of moonlight seeping through the paper windows of his room. The once calming stillness of the night now seemed suffocating, the walls of the new room closing in around him. His chest heaved as his breath quickened, and beads of sweat dripped from his brow, soaking into the bedding below. For a moment, he sat frozen, his hand clutching his forehead as if trying to stop the chaos in his mind. But as his heart began to calm, the room around him seemed to blur. The soft scent of wood and incense faded, replaced by the faint stench of dampness and rot. His surroundings dissolved into darkness, the wooden floor replaced by cold, wet stone beneath his feet. The trickle of water echoed off walls that no longer belonged to his new home but to a place far more familiar, a place he hadn't visited in some time. Naruto sighed, a mix of relief and annoyance settling over him as he looked around. Figures, he muttered, shaking his head. The endless maze of his mental sewer stretched out before him, the dim light from an unknown source casting long shadows on the water's surface. Without hesitation, Naruto stood, his bare feet splashing lightly in the shallow water as he walked forward, the path almost instinctual. A grin tugged at his lips as he approached massive open room that was once a cage. Behind where the gate used to be, nestled in the darkness, two glowing crimson eyes opened, cutting through the shadows like a predator spotting its prey. Finally decided to show up, huh? Naruto called out, crossing his arms. A low, rumbling chuckle resonated from the shadows as the hulking form of Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, shifted forward. The enormous creature rested its head lazily on its paws, its sharp teeth glinting as it grinned back at him. "Don't act like you didn't miss me, brat," Kurama rumbled, his voice a deep growl that carried both mockery and familiarity. Naruto snorted, leaning against Fox. "Miss you, maybe. But waking up like this every time you want to talk, that's getting old." Kurama's grin widened. "Don't call you here for fun. Something's bothering you, your mind is loud, chaotic. Even in your sleep, you're restless." Naruto's grin faltered slightly, and his arms fell to his sides. "Yeah, I guess you're not wrong." He looked down at his reflection in the shallow water beneath them, his expression softening. "A lot's happened, you know. We are finally out the seal, new world, new people, and now this whole bending thing is much bigger than imagined it would be back in our first unsealing." Kurama tilted his head slightly, his massive ears twitching. "You're adapting, that's more than most humans could manage. But there's something else, isn't there, something that's been eating at you?" Naruto hesitated, his gaze fixed on the water as he clenched his fists. "It's Tenzin," he admitted finally. "He asked me to help train Korra, to teach her. I thought staying in this world was about me finding freedom, but now it feels like responsibility." Kurama finished for him, his tone unusually serious. Naruto looked up, meeting the fox's piercing gaze. "Yeah. Responsibility. It's like I've been tossed into this crazy world, and now I'm supposed to be some kind of mentor or guide for the Avatar. I'm not even sure I know who I am anymore. Let alone how to help her figure out who she's supposed to be." Kurama let out a long, rumbling sigh, his tails flicking behind him. You've always been one to take on burdens, even when they weren't yours to carry, one can attest to that. But don't forget, brat, those burdens are what made you strong. If you think this Korra girl needs guidance, then give it to her. But don't lose sight of yourself in the process. Naruto frowned, mulling over the fox's words, slightly reminding his friend still had access to his memories. After a moment, he gave a small, reluctant nod. Yeah, you're right. I just gotta be me, huh? Kurama smirked. Exactly, you're loud, unpredictable, and stubborn as hell. If that's not enough to teach her, then nothing will be. Naruto couldn't help but laugh at that, the tension in his chest easing slightly. Thanks, Kurama, I guess I needed to hear that. The fox grunted, closing its eyes. You don't need my approval, brat, now get out of here and let me sleep. I'm not your therapist. Naruto rolled his eyes but hesitated, a lingering thought keeping him rooted in place. Sure, but I've got one more thing to ask. Kurama's massive eyes opened slightly, a flicker of annoyance passing through them. His eyebrow, or the closest equivalent a fox had to one, raised subtly. Go on, he grumbled, his voice carrying the weight of impatience. Naruto scratched the back of his head, his grin slipping into a more serious expression. I'm trying to keep my abilities hidden, I don't mind the excitement, but I don't want a repeat of what happened last time. You know, me, Wan, and that airbending cult. At the mention of that memory, Kurama's expression darkened, his lips curling back slightly to reveal sharp teeth. The memory seemed to settle heavily between the two of them, filling the air with an unspoken tension. The fox grimaced, letting out a low growl. You're not wrong to worry, the last thing this world needs is another group of fanatics trying to use you, or worse, destroy you. Naruto crossed his arms, a frown creasing his face. Yeah, and I don't want Korra or the others dragged into it either. They're already dealing with enough as it is. If word gets out about what I can really do, his voice trailed off, the weight of the possible consequences hanging heavily in the silence. Kurama's tails flicked behind him, a rare look of understanding crossing his face. You've got a point, humans have always been quick to fear what they don't understand. That airbending cult was proof of that. The fox's crimson eyes narrowed slightly, his tone softening just enough to reveal a hint of concern. But hiding who you are completely won't be easy. Sooner or later, someone's going to notice. Naruto gave a reluctant nod, his jaw tightening. I know, I just don't want to screw this up. Korra's got enough on her plate without me bringing my past into it. Kurama studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he let out a long sigh, his breath stirring the water at his feet. Then be smart about it, use your head for once. Show them just enough to stay under the radar. If anyone starts asking questions, throw them off the scent. But if push comes to shove, the fox's teeth glinted in the dim light as he grinned. You've got me, they won't stand a chance. Naruto couldn't help but smirk at that, his confidence returning. Thanks, Kurama, you're not as bad as you pretend to be. Don't push it, brat, the fox growled, though there was no real venom in his tone. Naruto turned away, his steps echoing softly as he made his way back down the sewer's path. Alright, I'll let you get back to your beauty sleep. But don't get too comfortable, I might need you sooner than you think. Kurama chuckled lowly, the sound reverberating through the mindscape. I'm always here, Naruto, just don't make a habit of waking me up for stupid questions. The blonde gave him a cheeky wave without turning back. No promises. As the world of the sewer faded and Naruto opened his eyes once more, the familiar sights and sounds of his room on Air Temple Island greeted him. The faint chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the night breeze filled the air. He took a deep breath, feeling a little more at ease. Still, as he sat up in bed, his mind raced. Kurama was right, hiding wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. For now, at least. Today, he'd give them enough to stay off his trail. It would be more than he was comfortable with, but it would allow them to leave him alone. But as he looked out the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been wrong in Republic City. Naruto went back to sleep, though his mind still churned with thoughts and plans. When morning came, he awoke with renewed focus and quickly slipped into his routine. He donned his signature orange sleeveless shinobi jacket and baggy black pants, tying his headband securely around his forehead. Black sandals completed the look. As he glanced at his reflection in the mirror, a grin tugged at his lips, before it faltered. Something felt off. His frown deepened as he leaned closer, realizing his hair had grown out during his time on the island. The way his headband pushed it up made it look a little too puffy. With a sigh, Naruto removed the headband, wrapping it around his arm instead. Running his fingers through his unruly blonde spikes, he straightened them into their usual spiky style. For a moment, though, the longer strands reminded him of his father. A bittersweet smile crossed his face. "Guess I'm starting to look a little like you, Dad," he murmured before turning away from the mirror. Stepping out of his room, Naruto set off to find Tenzin and Korra, but instead, he stumbled across Tenzin's 3 children. The 2 sisters stood off to the side, watching their younger brother dart around like a whirlwind. Milo, with his toothy grin and boundless energy, was running in chaotic circles, screaming at the top of his lungs. Naruto paused, tilting his head as he watched the boys' antics with a mixture of amusement and confusion. "Does he ever run out of steam?" Naruto muttered aloud, scratching the back of his head. Ikki giggled, clapping her hands. "Nope, Milo's always like this. Daddy says it's his way of connecting with the universe." Jinora, ever composed, simply shrugged. "Or he just likes screaming." Naruto snorted, crossing his arms as he watched Milo flail about like an airborne hurricane. "I think this kid might even have more energy than I did as a kid, didn't think that was possible." Just then, Milo's screaming began to grate on Naruto's nerves. He frowned and swiftly grabbed the boy by the back of his shirt, hoisting him into the air. All right, Milo, chill out for a sec." Milo kept flailing his limbs as if he were still on solid ground, his voice not losing any of its volume. "Put me down, I'm training to become a legend." Ikki burst into laughter while Jinora's lips twitched in a rare moment of amusement. Naruto, meanwhile, rolled his eyes and lowered Milo back to the ground. The boy immediately resumed his wild antics, darting around and making exaggerated whooshing noises. Naruto turned back to Ikki and Jinora, shaking his head. "I didn't think I would meet someone crazier than me. Never thought I'd see the day." Ikki giggled again. "That's just Milo, you get used to him." Jinora offered a small nod, eventually. Naruto smirked but decided not to linger too long. "All right kiddos, you've got your chaos covered. Now, where's Tenzin and Korra?" Jinora pointed toward the training area. "Dad's with Korra over there. I think they're preparing for her sparring session." Naruto nodded, his grin widening as he turned to leave. "Thanks, I'll catch you all later, try not to let this one," he pointed at Milo, "tear down the island." "No promises," Milo shouted as he launched himself into another round of airbending sprints. Naruto chuckled and made his way toward the training grounds. When he arrived, he found Tenzin standing calmly with his arms crossed, observing Korra as she practiced a set of precise airbending movements. Her motions were sharp, and her frustration was palpable as the wind practically ignored her commands. "You're overthinking it," Tenzin said, his tone firm yet patient. Korra huffed, wiping sweat from her brow. "How am I supposed to not overthink something this complicated?" Naruto, leaning casually against a post, watched her struggle with a smirk. "Hey, Korra, maybe stop trying to control it so much. Airbending's all about going with the flow, isn't it?" She turned to him. Raising an eyebrow, her scowl softened into a teasing smirk. "You've said that like 100 times already. You think it magically gets easier just because you keep repeating it?" Naruto grinned, unbothered by her jab. "Maybe not, but you're thinking too much again. You don't bend air with your brain, you bend it with instinct. Trust yourself a little more." Korra rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the hint of a grin tugging at her lips. "Easy for you to say, Mr. I'm not a waterbender." He shrugged, turning his attention to Tenzin with a mock-innocent look. "So, am I officially her teacher now, or do we need to do one more spar to see if I can help her or not?" Tenzin pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly losing patience. "Let's just say you're her tutor, unless in the case you're not helpful to her growth like I thought you'd be. Though now, I'm not entirely sure this was the right decision." Naruto laughed, clapping his hands. "Relax, Tenzin, I've got it under control. Korra, how about we skip the lecture and go straight to sparring? Sometimes the best way to learn is by doing." Korra's competitive grin returned as she cracked her knuckles. "You really think you can keep up with me?" "Oh please," Naruto said, his grin turning mischievous. "Let's not forget who was the MVP in our pro bending match. You were decent though, great at dodging." "Dodging?" Korra scoffed, stepping into the sparring ring with a dramatic roll of her eyes. "Right, because you carried the team." Tenzin stepped aside, his face a mix of intrigue and curiosity. "Well, I guess you two could spar. I wasn't expecting you two to fight until next week," said Tenzin to himself, his words going unheard. As Naruto and Korra stood opposite each other, thoughts began to reign in the blonde's head. "Show enough to get them off your back," those words kept repeating, but he didn't know how much was enough. But as he thought on it, he supposed his jutsu, and a basic overview of his life would do good. After all, a little is a lot. He would also make sure that no one outside of Tenzin's family, aside from Korra, knew about who he really was. If he was going to stay here and teach the girl, he would trust them, just a bit. But not right now. The fight came first, and he couldn't wait to see the look on Korra's face when he bent all 4 elements, 5 in his case. The two waited in silence, their eyes locked onto a single falling leaf. It danced in the wind, drifting lazily toward the ground. The moment it touched the floor, they sprang into action. Naruto dodged the incoming water with ease, twisting his body as he backflipped away from 2 more jets. Korra raised her leg, bending water along with her movement before spinning and launching it toward him. She followed up by arcing her arms downward, sending another attack from above, confident this one would catch him. It didn't. Rather than dodge, Naruto blocked the attack with ease. As the water splashed around him, he grinned. "This it?" he asked, his voice cocky. Korra's eyes narrowed. "Not even close," she shot back, determination laced in her tone. She quickly bent the water pool on the floor, sending it slithering toward him in an attempt to ensnare him. But once again, Naruto evaded, weaving through her attacks with minimal effort. Frustration bubbled inside Korra, but she remained patient. After a few more attempts, she finally caught him, wrapping water tentacles around his arms and legs before freezing them into solid ice. Naruto was now encased in ice, his head tilted downward as Korra smirked triumphantly. "Wow, I expected better," she teased, chuckling. Guess you're not as good a waterbender as the Avatar. Naruto remained silent, his unseen grin growing as he clenched his fists. Korra, I'm gonna need you to use all 4 elements when I get out of this, he warned. Korra scoffed. Oh come, even if you're a waterbender, I've seen how you move your hands to bend. I made sure to keep them apart, there's no way you're getting out of this. She crossed her arms, giving a small smirk. So tell me, how exactly do you plan to bend water with no movement? Naruto's smirk deepened. Just remember, I told you to go all out. Korra rolled her eyes. Yeah, like I'd need all 4 elements to. Korra froze when she heard a crack. The sound of splitting ice filled the air, her eyes widened as she saw cracks spiderwebbing across the frozen tentacles. More fractures formed, shards breaking off, until a loud boom filled the air. Naruto burst free, shattering his icy prison with minimal effort. I warned you, he said simply before forming the tiger hand seal. With a deep inhale, he expelled a massive fireball. Korra barely had time to process what she was seeing. Fire, from him. The shock registered on both her face and Tenzin's, but there was no time to hesitate, the fireball was already closing in. Reacting fast, she shot a water blast straight into its center, stopping it in its tracks before extinguishing it with another jet. She exhaled, barely a moment to recover, only to sense Naruto suddenly behind her. Eyes widening, she twisted just in time to see his foot swinging toward her side. The kick wasn't meant to be devastating, it was a spar, after all, but it was strong enough to send her skidding across the ground. She managed to stay on her feet, but irritation flared within her as she clutched her side. What the hell was that? She snapped, standing to her full height, her glare sharp. Naruto only chuckled, clearly enjoying her reaction. Aren't you a waterbender? You can't just bend fire, that should be impossible. He let out a low laugh, already anticipating this response. But the fight wasn't over yet. I'll explain when we're done, he said, leaving no room for argument. Unless you want to quit now? Korra's nostrils flared. Hell no. Her confusion and irritation mixed with her growing curiosity. It had only been about 2 weeks since his release, and already, Naruto had helped her, pissed her off, and now, he had even more secrets. She wasn't about to let him off easy. Determined to prevent him from forming more of those strange hand signs, she charged forward, streams of water trailing behind her. Without hesitation, she blasted him with the first wave, disorienting him before shoving him back with the second. As he skidded across the ground, she launched a boulder his way. Naruto barely had time to react. Gritting his teeth, he braced against it, using his chakra to reinforce his body. With a grunt, he shoved the boulder aside. Quickly forming the ox hand seal, he sent a surge of earth rippling toward Korra. Then, with a cross-shaped seal, he created 2 clones, sending them sprinting at her from both sides. Korra's eyes darted between them. No escape. Thinking fast, she slammed her foot into the ground, launching herself skyward with a pillar of earth. Wind whipped through her hair as she soared upward. Mid-air, she propelled herself with a blast of fire from her feet, hovering as she gathered her bearings. Without wasting time, she bent multiple fire blasts at Naruto, each one scorching the ground on impact. Naruto dodged with ease, weaving between them. Korra wasn't letting up, she kept the pressure on, sending more flames his way, determined to land a hit. Then, just as he leapt away from another blast, he formed a new hand seal, the bird sign. Korra smirked. Got you. She launched a powerful firebolt at him, only for Naruto to vanish in a puff of smoke. Her eyes widened. Up here. She barely had time to look up before she felt the wind blast slam into her gut. The force sent her plummeting toward the ground, only for Naruto to catch her mid-fall. Korra scowled up at him, her frustration evident. What the hell was all that? You just bent all 4 elements. Naruto chuckled nervously, hoping for some backup from Tenzin. The airbender, however, merely observed with quiet intrigue. I'm not a bender, Naruto muttered, trying to lighten the mood. Like hell you're not, Korra roared, her glare intensifying. That should be impossible, so stop with the jokes and explain. Naruto sighed, realizing there was no escaping this conversation. Also, put me down, Korra grumbled, her face tinged pink. He quickly complied, setting her on her feet as she stormed toward Tenzin. Naruto exhaled, all right, but you two have to promise not to tell anyone, aside from Milo, Jinora, Ikki, and your wife, he said, nodding toward Tenzin. I wouldn't expect you to keep something like this from them. Tenzin nodded solemnly, while Korra still looked irritated. Naruto took a deep breath, carefully choosing his words. First off, I'm not a bender. Korra opened her mouth to argue, but Tenzin silenced her with a raised hand. Imagine a time when everyone could bend all elements, Naruto continued. A time when the elements weren't bent, but created by the energy inside the body. That's where I lived before my first sealing, a world where bending wasn't even a concept, where jutsu was everything. Tenzin stroked his beard, contemplating. Jutsu? Naruto grinned. Jutsu are techniques, different from bending. They aren't limited to just elements, they can do a lot more. Korra folded her arms, like those other yous? Exactly, they're shadow clones, by the way. Tenzin nodded at this, more gears turning in his head as he ran what Naruto said through his mind. So before your sealing, anyone could use all elements? Technically, yeah, Naruto admitted. But it wasn't common, and we actually had 5 elements instead of 4. Tenzin's expression remained thoughtful. And can you teach Korra this? Naruto shook his head. Jutsu and bending are fundamentally different, but their principles are similar, so I can still help. Tenzin nodded, then you'll be a great help to her. Korra huffed, still frustrated, having more questions, that she knew the blonde wouldn't answer. Except for one that was still bugging her. Then what are you, if not a bender? Naruto grinned, ear to ear, it seemed to grow as if alive, threatening to split his face in 2. I'm a shinobi, he answered with that same ear-splitting grin. He cracked then his knuckles, his grin going back to normal, or as normal as it could be. Now, let's start training. Time skip. It was getting dark as Naruto watched over Korra, who was preparing to go through the newly repaired fan mechanism. The blonde had helped rebuild it, and he was just relieved it hadn't taken too long. Jinora and Ikki stood nearby, ready to start up the fans. With a nod from Jinora, the blades began spinning at high speeds, creating a powerful current of air. Korra hesitated for a brief moment, likely psyching herself up, before stepping into the whirlwind. Naruto observed closely as she moved, her motions resembling the ones he'd seen her use in pro-bending, only now, they were more fluid, more in tune with the air around her. Each step and turn showed a growing understanding of airbending, her movements refined and instinctual. With a final spin, she made it through to the other side, landing near Jinora and Ikki. She huffed, catching her breath, but a small smile formed on her face, one of accomplishment. Naruto, along with the 2 sisters, grinned at her success. That was great, he said, his grin widening. You're getting closer to airbending. Korra looked up at Naruto, still catching her breath, but his words made her smile just a little wider. She wiped the sweat from her forehead before placing her hands on her hips. Yeah, well, it's about time, she said, still feeling the rush of excitement from her success. Took me long enough. Jinora nodded in approval. You're improving a lot. Your movements were way more natural this time. Ikki bounced excitedly beside her sister. Yeah, you actually looked like an airbender for once. Korra gave the younger girl an amused glare. But she couldn't argue. It did feel better. She still had a long way to go, but this was progress. Naruto crossed his arms, his grin never fading. Told you just needed to stop thinking so hard and let it happen. Korra rolled her eyes, though there was no real irritation behind it. Yeah, Mr. Mysterious Shinobi. Maybe I should have asked you to teach me earlier. Naruto chuckled. Probably, I'd have had you flying through those fans days ago. Korra would have let out a small laugh, but Jinora's sudden remark stopped her. Ooh, he's cute, Jinora said, casually looking off behind Korra and Naruto. Both teens turned to follow her gaze, while Ikki bounced up and down in excitement. They were met with the sight of Mako walking toward them, the sun dipping below the horizon while the moon began to rise. Isn't that the firebender who drives you crazy? Jinora continued. Korra couldn't help but roll her eyes, though she quickly gained a smile. Is it good crazy, or bad crazy? Do you like him more than Naruto? Ikki asked, still bouncing in place. Korra gained an blush at the mention of Naruto, and with a flick of her wrist, she sent the two airbenders flying into the air with an earth launch. She knew they'd be fine thanks to their airbending. But it was still satisfying to silence them for a moment. Korra turned back to Mako just in time to see him and Naruto bump fists. She quickly cleared her throat, trying to maintain her cool, though she couldn't quite hide the awkwardness in her voice. Hey, Mako, she said, forcing a smile. Naruto chuckled softly, but Mako ignored it, his gaze shifting between his two teammates. Have either of you seen Bolin? He asked, his tone simple, though his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. Nice to see you too, Korra said sarcastically, crossing her arms. We haven't seen him since practice this morning. Is something up? She added, recalling how grueling those early practice hours had been. A fact that still made Naruto want to crawl back into bed. Mako sighed heavily, glancing away, his frown deepening. I don't know. Bolin has a knack for getting into stupid situations. He paused, then added, I'll see you two later. Before he could leave, Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder, a firm and unyielding sense of worry settling in his gut, the kind he hadn't felt since his childhood. We could help you look for him, Naruto offered, his voice sincere. Mako shook his head, about to pull away, but Korra stopped him, her voice almost playful now. Come on, cool guy. Let us help. We can take Naga. Mako raised an eyebrow. Who's Naga? Korra puffed out her chest with pride. She's my best friend, and a great tracker. The three of them set off through Republic City, riding Naga, Korra and Mako at the front, Naruto clinging to the back. Naruto could barely keep himself steady as the polar bear dog bounced up and down, nearly throwing him off a few times. The blonde gritted his teeth, determined not to let himself fall, all while wondering if Korra was still upset with him for avoiding her questions. He couldn't bring himself to cave in yet. But he figured this was her way of getting back at him, and he could respect it without giving in. As he steadied himself, Mako muttered something about Korra's best friend being a polar bear dog making sense, which made Naruto smirk. The trio came to a stop in an open plaza, a large statue standing at its center. Naruto didn't recognize the figure, but what caught his attention was the surrounding area, clean shops and buildings encircling the monument. Even at night, the plaza remained lit, glowing with artificial lights that illuminated the empty streets. But it wasn't completely empty. Naruto's gaze shifted to the small children running around, their presence almost unnoticed, either because no one cared or because no one bothered to look. Their clothes were tattered, their faces smudged with dirt. The sight struck a chord deep within him, stirring memories he wished weren't so familiar. The resemblance to his childhood in Konoha was too close for comfort. His chest ached, but he pushed the feeling down. He had learned a long time ago that there were things he couldn't fix overnight. This is his usual hangout, Mako spoke, breaking Naruto from his thoughts. The blonde lingered on the sight of the kids for a second longer before stepping forward, joining Mako and Korra as they approached the statue's base. There, sprawled lazily on the stone platform, was a boy no older than 12. His worn-out jacket did little to shield him from the cold ground, but he didn't seem to mind. Mako took the lead, stepping ahead of Naruto and Korra. "Tsukuchi, have you seen my brother?" he asked, his tone firm. The boy didn't react right away, though a sly smile flickered across his face before disappearing. "Maybe," he drawled. "But my memory's a little foggy, might need some help clearing it up." His voice carried a knowing lilt, making Naruto roll his eyes. Mako sighed, already expecting this. Korra arched a brow, unimpressed. "You're good, Tsukuchi," the firebender said dryly before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a few yuan. Tsukuchi held out his hand, and Mako placed the bill into his palm. The boy swiped his nose with his thumb before nodding. "Yeah, I saw him." Mako's posture straightened. "When?" "About noon." "What was he doing?" Tsukuchi hesitated, his fingers rubbing against the yuan in his grip. He held out his free hand expectantly. Mako sighed again, fishing out another bill before handing it over. Satisfied, Tsukuchi pocketed the money. He was putting on some kinda circus act. Then Shady Shin rolled up, flashing some serious cash. His tone turned more serious. Bolin took off with him in his hot rod. The triple threats, the red monsoons, the Agni Kais, every triad in the city is muscling up for something big. Now, that's all you're getting out of me. With that, Tsukuchi spun on his heel and darted off, leaving the three standing there with the weight of his words settling in. Naruto frowned, the names replaying in his head. Triple threats, he was sure he had heard that name before, though he wasn't sure where. Either way, this situation had gone from Bolin being missing to him being in some serious trouble. "What was he talking about?" Korra asked, her confusion evident. She clearly wasn't familiar with the criminal underbelly of Republic City. Mako crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "It's simple, but bad. A turf war is about to go down, and Bolin is stuck right in the middle of it." Naruto exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. He really hated being right about these things. Naruto, Korra, and Mako rode atop Naga as they made their way through the city, with Mako leading them toward the triple threat triad hideout. Naruto didn't know how Mako was so sure of its location, but he didn't question it. He had no place to be doubting anyone right now. Along the way, they stumbled upon Pabu, Bolin's fire ferret and the team's unofficial mascot. That alone was enough to set off alarms in Mako's mind. If Pabu was here, alone, that meant Bolin was in trouble. When they finally arrived at their destination, Naruto's gut feeling only worsened. A place like this, one belonging to a powerful gang, should have had guards stationed outside. Yet, the front was eerily empty, it was too quiet, and that silence made Naruto uneasy. His eyes narrowed as he followed Mako to the entrance. Korra right beside him. Mako cautiously examined the front, pressing his ear against the door as if listening for something. "Something's not right," Mako muttered, almost to himself. Naruto and Korra exchanged a glance. The night air felt heavier, charged with an unsettling stillness. No faint hum of machinery, no muffled voices, not even the distant chirp of insects, just complete and unnatural silence. Mako moved closer, running his fingers over the wooden door before his expression darkened. "We better be cautious, there's usually thugs posted up here." That was all Naruto needed to hear. He was tired of standing around, tired of waiting. If Mako himself knew something was off, there was no point in hesitating. Without warning, Naruto kicked the door open with a sharp crack, stepping in first with a serious expression. If there was an ambush, he'd take the first hit before letting anything happen to Korra or Mako. But just as he suspected, there was no one. The place was a mess, not just from wear and tear but from clear signs of struggle. Broken furniture littered the floor. Playing cards scattered across a dust-covered table, a busted radio sitting alone in a grimy corner. Yuan bills lay strewn about, as if tossed in the middle of a fight, too chaotic to have been abandoned intentionally. Naruto's eyes darted around the dimly lit space as he stepped forward, scanning each corner with sharp focus, while Korra and Mako followed close behind. He approached the table, picking up one of the scattered cards, his mind racing with possibilities, but none of them made sense. With a small sigh, he set it down and picked up a broken liquor bottle instead. There had definitely been a fight here, but there were no bodies, no injured men left behind, just emptiness. They were taken, Naruto muttered to himself. Or maybe worse, his thoughts darkened to new possibilities, only to get distracted by Mako. "Bolin, you in here," Mako called out, his voice echoing through the empty space. Silence. Naruto turned toward him, about to say something, when the sharp roar of an engine cut through the night. Instinctively, all three of them snapped toward the source, the back door, which was just as broken as the front. There was no time to dwell on it. They rushed outside just in time to see a truck speeding off, flanked by several motorcycles. In the back of the truck, Bolin and an unfamiliar man, likely Shady Shin, were tied up and gagged. Mako's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening. "Bolin," he shouted, his voice raw with urgency. Before any of them could sprint after the vehicle, two masked figures on motorcycles hurled grenades in their direction. Naruto instinctively bolted forward, shielding Korra and Mako as the grenades exploded in a burst of green smoke. The thick haze engulfed them, burning their lungs as they coughed, stopping in their tracks. By the time the smoke cleared, the truck and motorcycles had already gained distance, their engines fading into the night. Pabu chirped, making himself known as he stood on Mako's shoulder. The animal seemed almost sad watching Bolin being taken, which only served to make Naruto angry. Naruto's eyes darted through the thinning smoke, locking onto the truck's tail lights as it sped down the empty streets. They weren't losing Bolin, not a chance. "Korra, Mako, go after them, I'll be right behind you," Naruto ordered, bending his knees in preparation. Korra didn't need to be told twice. She whistled for Naga, and the moment the polar bear dog skidded to a stop beside them, she and Mako scrambled onto her back. "Come on girl, let's go," Korra urged, gripping the reins. With a powerful lunge, Naga shot forward, her claws digging into the pavement as she charged after the fleeing masked men. Naruto exhaled sharply. He knew this would raise questions, especially from Korra, but maybe even from Mako too. But right now, none of that mattered. He had to get Bolin back. They could ask all the questions in the world afterward. Slamming his foot against the ground, Naruto propelled himself forward with a burst of speed, his body blurring as he sprinted alongside Naga. The wind howled in his ears, but his focus remained locked on the truck ahead. Just as he expected, Korra and Mako eyed him, their expressions flickering with confusion. But they didn't say anything, quickly shifting their focus back to the chase. Pabu, still perched on Mako's shoulder, clung to the firebender's coat, chittering anxiously as they gained ground. That's when the motorcycles flanking the truck took notice. One of the masked riders twisted back, spotting the incoming trio. With a sharp whistle, he signaled to his partners. Almost immediately, more motorcycles appeared, 3 more merging into formation, making 5 in total. "We've got company," Mako shouted, gripping Naga's fur tightly. "I see, Korra replied, already pulling water from her pouch, her fingers tightening in anticipation. The first rider accelerated toward Naruto, his hand flicking out to reveal a gleaming blade. With a swift motion, he slashed as he passed. Naruto ducked, twisting mid-stride before leaping onto the back of the rider's motorcycle. The masked man barely had time to react before Naruto grabbed him by the collar and yanked him off, tossing him onto the pavement. The motorcycle wobbled before crashing into a street lamp in a burst of sparks. Naruto landed back on his feet without missing a beat, pushing forward. The second rider targeted Naga, pulling out a pair of throwing knives and hurling them toward the polar bear dog. Pabu shrieked in warning. Mako reacted instantly, throwing up a wall of fire. The knives melted midair, forcing the rider to swerve away, giving Korra the perfect opening. With a sharp tug on the reins, she had Naga leap forward, her powerful jaws snapping down on the motorcycle's back wheel. The tire shredded in an instant, sending the rider tumbling into the street. "That's what you get," Korra shouted before urging Naga forward again. They had taken down 2, but the remaining 3 riders were proving more skilled. Korra and Mako steadied themselves, launching a barrage of fire and earth at the masked men. But these guys were fast, too fast. They dodged with ease, maneuvering around each attack with calculated precision. Naruto moved in to help, summoning kunai, with his eyes suddenly glowing red. He threw them with expert precision, but just like before, his attacks barely fazed them. They weaved through his strikes, reacting almost instinctively. Then, suddenly, the chase took an unexpected turn. The vehicles veered into a large open area, like a blank town square, surrounded by darkened buildings. No streetlights illuminated the space, the only glow came from the headlights of the truck and motorcycles ahead. Something felt off. Before Naruto or Naga could react, thick ropes shot out from the darkness, coiling tightly around their limbs. Naga let out a pained growl, skidding to a halt, while Naruto hit the pavement hard, eating dirt as the metal bindings tightened around him. He gritted his teeth, struggling against them, but something was wrong. The more he fought, the tighter they became. These weren't normal restraints. As Naruto wrestled with the ropes, Korra and Mako barely had time to react before the last 2 riders dismounted, rushing them with unsettling speed. Korra threw a punch, aiming to bend water from her pouch, but before she could, one of the masked figures struck a precise point on her arm. Her body locked up, a strange numbness spreading through her limbs. She staggered back, eyes wide in alarm. Mako tried to blast them with fire, but the second attacker was faster, expertly dodging before jabbing at key points on Mako's body. His flames sputtered out, his limbs going stiff. Both of them collapsed, completely immobilized. Naruto's eyes widened, now back to their sky blue. He had seen similar things from the Hyuga clan, but he hadn't expected a similar technique to the 64 palms to survive in such a time. Before the masked men could move in to capture them, Naga tore free from her bindings with a ferocious growl. The massive beast lunged, swiping her powerful claws and forcing the masked men to retreat. At the same time, Naruto finally broke free, surging forward with a Rasengan forming in his palm. He charged, aiming for the 2 attackers. But at the last moment, they dodged. It wasn't just a normal evasion, they moved with precision, twirling acrobatically, their agility almost unnatural. Before Naruto could chase, they leaped onto their remaining motorcycle and sped away, vanishing into the shadows. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh, clenching his fists before turning back to Korra and Mako. He knelt beside them as they groaned, regaining movement. Korra flexed her fingers, then tried to bend, but nothing happened. Her breath hitched, her heart pounding. I can't bend," she whispered, eyes filled with fear. Mako sat up, wincing slightly. "It's okay, it'll wear off," he assured Korra, his voice steady but tense. Those were chi blockers. Naruto stared after the retreating attackers, his mind racing. "Do you know who hired them?" Naruto asked, his gaze still locked on the distance. "They're not for hire," Mako said, his tone laced with disdain. "They're Amon's henchmen." Naruto frowned, a name sparking a faint recognition in his mind. He couldn't quite place it, perhaps someone had mentioned it when he and Tenzin were out in Republic City. Or maybe he was just imagining things. "Amon," Korra's voice sounded uncertain, snapping Naruto from his thoughts. He turned toward Mako, who nodded in confirmation. "The leader of the Equalists," Naruto said absently, causing both Mako and Korra to glance at him in surprise. As if a memory flickered, Naruto stared off for a moment, then shook his head and turned back to the group, his arms crossed. "If that's the case, what does Amon want with the triple threats?" Naruto asked. Mako shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "Don't know, but whatever it is, it can't be good." Korra turned back to Mako, noticing the sorrow etched on his face. Without a word, she grabbed his shoulder. Mako gave her a small smile, but his look hardened again. A long stretch of the night passed in silence as the trio continued to search for Bolin, but to no avail. Now, Korra and Mako stood beside Naga, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Without warning, Naruto jumped down from a nearby rooftop, landing effortlessly in front of them. The blonde had already told Mako the barest bits of his past, just enough to avoid too many questions. Luckily, Mako wasn't as invested in Naruto's history as Korra was. With a quick glance down, Naruto shook his head subtly, making Mako sigh deeply. "I couldn't find any trace of him," Naruto admitted, his head still bowed slightly. "What about you two?" Korra sighed and placed her hands on her hips, looking to Naga. "We've been out all night, no sign of him." Mako didn't say anything for a few moments, crossing his arms, lost in thought. "We've got to keep looking," he said sharply. Pabu, now peacefully asleep around his neck, seemed to embody the quiet tension hanging in the air. "But where?" Naruto added, a note of frustration in his voice. "We need a new lead, and right now, we all need rest." Mako glanced at him apologetically, but Naruto sighed in agreement. They both looked down to the street, exhaustion weighing on them. But Korra, with sudden determination, turned toward a different direction, her eyes widening. She pivoted back to the boys, grinning. "I've got an idea," she said dramatically, causing both Mako and Naruto to raise an eyebrow in surprise. Without missing a beat, she crossed her arms, a renewed resolve in her eyes as she explained. "The first day I got to Republic City, I stopped by here because I didn't know where to go. There was an equalist protester with a stand, talking about Amon. He'll definitely be here tomorrow." Mako and Naruto exchanged looks, skeptical but intrigued. "Right there," Naruto gestured to the park. "Yep," Korra confirmed with a nod. "And you think he'll know where Bolin is?" Mako asked, his brow furrowing. Korra hesitated for a moment, but her determination never wavered. "It's the best lead we've got. It's all we've got." Mako looked off for a moment, slightly disappointed, before Naruto reassured him. "We'll do what we can," Naruto said firmly, then motioned for them to sit. Korra gave Naga a gentle pat, and Mako placed Pabu on the polar bear dog. Before the silence could settle in, Korra spoke up again. "So, why is Bolin running around with the triple threats anyway?" she asked. Mako's posture stiffened slightly, and he grew uncomfortable before speaking. "Well, we used to do some work for them," he admitted, then quickly added, "nothing shady. We just ran numbers. We were orphans, out on the streets, and I did what I had to do to keep my little brother safe." There was a quiet pause. Naruto's mind drifted to his own past, his brow furrowing in thought, while Korra looked at Mako with a mix of sympathy and understanding. "Can I ask what happened to your parents?" Naruto asked, his voice quiet but steady. Mako's eyes darkened. "A firebender mugged them, blazed them down right in front of me and Bolin when I was 8. Naruto's heart tightened. He could relate, in some way. The pain, the loss, it all felt familiar. The difference was Mako had someone to hold him together, he wasn't alone. The night ended quietly, the trio stayed close, their minds heavy with unanswered questions. Naruto, though, was the last to fall asleep, his mind still racing with thoughts of Bolin, the triple threats, and the mysterious Amon. Somehow, Naruto was the first to wake up. He rubbed his eyes, trying to clear the remnants of sleep from his vision. Slowly, he turned his head to his side, his gaze landing on Mako and Korra. Mako was leaned back against the bench, his arms crossed, his face relaxed in slumber, though a hint of tension still lingered on his features. Korra, on the other hand, was leaning against Mako, her head resting on his shoulder. Her breathing was steady, deep in sleep. Her face soft and peaceful. Naruto's eyes lingered on the two for a moment, his mind hazy from sleep but still alert enough to notice the quiet bond between them. A faint tug in his chest caught him off guard, but before he could process the sensation, he shook it off. "Focus," he muttered to himself, as though trying to clear his thoughts. He stared at the ground for a moment, his mind whirling, the weight of their mission still pressing on him. They were still on the bench, the early morning light barely starting to break through the horizon. The air was cool, the city still mostly silent. Naga was sprawled nearby, breathing softly in her sleep, a sense of calm hanging over the scene. Naruto glanced back at the duo beside him, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't used to this, being surrounded by people who were, more than just teammates. Friends, they were starting to feel like. The idea was still strange to him, and the emotions it stirred were unfamiliar. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to focus on something else, anything else, but his thoughts kept circling back to the small things he'd noticed, the fleeting moments he hadn't been able to shake. Mako and Korra, their closeness. The way they moved as one, even when they weren't actively working together. And him, always just slightly on the outside, unsure how to fit in. He closed his eyes briefly, taking in a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Just as he opened his eyes again, something else caught his attention. Seizing the chance to leave the two sleeping, Naruto created a clone, ensuring their safety while they rested. The sound of a loud voice reached his ears. Amplified by something unfamiliar, perhaps new technology that had emerged in this time. Naruto couldn't understand why so many new things had to exist, but he wasn't about to waste time dwelling on it. He didn't need to prepare for a fight, he was already ready. There was no need for theatrics, no reason to make a scene. As he walked, he knew this wouldn't take long. The voice grew louder, coming from a stand just behind the spring. Naruto moved toward it, listening closely to the words. Equality now, the amplified voice called out, reminding Naruto of the announcer in a pro-bending match, though with a more intense tone. "We want equality now," the voice repeated. Naruto stepped in front of the stand and looked up, seeing the obvious equalist protester. This had to be the man Korra had mentioned, and if he could handle this quickly, it would save them all time. But as he surveyed the scene, he noticed a crowd of non-benders gathered around the stand. Not all of them appeared to agree with the protesters' message, but the majority clearly did. Naruto didn't want to make a spectacle of it. There was no need for attention. He needed to handle this discreetly. Only one method came to mind. Naruto's eyes shifted, the familiar pinwheel pattern forming in his Sharingan, signaling the activation of his dojutsu. He remembered how he had acquired this ability, a gift from the person who had sealed him away. Naruto's Sharingan activated, and the world around him twisted. The protester's eyes widened in confusion as the genjutsu took hold. His body went rigid, trapped within the illusion, while everyone else was frozen. Naruto now stood calmly in front of him, voice steady and firm. "Tell me where Amon is hiding." The protester hesitated, his lips trembling as he looked around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. What is this? What are you doing to me?" His voice was shaky. Panic creeping in. "Answer my question," Naruto said coldly. "Where is Amon?" The protester tried to stumble back slightly, still in denial. I don't know what you're talking about. Amon is a leader, he believes in equality, he doesn't need to hide." Naruto's eyes narrowed, his patience thinning. "You're not being truthful, you're a part of this, whether you like it or not." The protester shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of what to say. He glanced away, but Naruto's voice cut through the silence again. "If you want this to end quickly, tell me where he is." The protester paused, his eyes darting around. I don't know where he is. But," he swallowed hard, "there's something. A poster, it's important." Naruto tilted his head slightly intrigued. "A poster, what about it?" The protester looked up at him, his voice faltering but still determined to continue the protest. "The poster has a code on it, small, in the corners. It's the only way to find him. You have to look closely," he coughed nervously. "That's all I know, I swear." Naruto's expression remained unreadable as he processed the information. Without saying another word, he discreetly glanced to the ground, where a folded poster had been discarded. He reached down swiftly, picking it up without the protester noticing, then tucked it into his jacket. The protester, now snapping back to his original state, started shouting again, his voice amplifying as he resumed his rhetoric. "Equality now, equality for all." Naruto took one last look at him, silently turning away. With the poster secured, he walked calmly back towards the bench where Korra and Mako were resting. As he approached, he let out a quiet breath, deep in thought. He sat back down on the bench beside them. The poster still hidden from view, Mako shifted slightly, still half asleep, while Korra stirred next to him, unaware of the brief exchange that had just happened. Naruto looked at the poster in his pocket and then out into the distance, his mind working. This was just one piece of the puzzle, he couldn't let his guard down now. "Find anything?" Korra asked, her voice still groggy as she sat up. Naruto glanced over at her, giving a slight nod. "I found something," he said quietly, not ready to share the full details yet. The poster would lead them somewhere, he was sure of it. For now, they needed rest. Korra glanced between him and Mako, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Mako shifted too, giving a small sigh. "We'll figure it out soon enough," he muttered, half-conscious, and then laid back against Naga. Naruto sat still, his eyes trained on the streets ahead, his mind processing the protesters' cryptic words. After they'd spent the better part of the morning deciphering the code, Naruto was finally able to piece it together. The meeting was set for nightfall. He hadn't been wrong about the significance of the poster, it was the key, just as the protester had said. The three of them, with the poster in hand, would gain entry into the meeting, into the night of revelations. From the few clues Naruto had gathered, it seemed Bolin was likely to be brought there. Amon, after having ordered the Triad's capture, was planning something far more dangerous. By nightfall, the trio found themselves standing before a nondescript warehouse, the sky now darkening. Naruto, Korra, and Mako were dressed in plain jackets, blending in with the sea of non-benders. They had to be quick. There was no room for error. The entry was seamless, no questions, no problems. They slipped into the crowd, unnoticed for now, but all too aware of the danger surrounding them. The moment they stepped inside, their eyes widened. The warehouse was packed with people, all murmuring excitedly, waiting for whatever revelation Amon had promised. Naruto couldn't help but feel the weight of the crowd's animosity in the air. There had to be hundreds, maybe thousands, of people here, and every single one of them hated benders. Mako's voice was low as he muttered, "I've never seen so many people in one place." Naruto and Korra exchanged a glance, and then moved deeper into the crowd, both scanning for Bolin. "Keep your eyes open," Naruto said, his voice a little more serious than usual. "As soon as we find Bolin, we're getting out of here." Minutes passed in tense silence before the voice of the announcer blared through the speakers. "Please welcome, your savior, Amon," the voice roared. The crowd erupted in deafening cheers, the sounds cascading around the warehouse. Naruto's gaze hardened, his muscles tensing as the platform beneath the stage began to rise, revealing Amon himself, flanked by a group of masked chi blockers. Amon stepped forward, his posture commanding as the cheers grew louder. He raised his hands behind his back, his mask looming over the crowd, exuding an aura of power. The cheers only grew louder as Amon made his way to the microphone, his footsteps amplified by the silence that had suddenly overtaken the room. As he reached the center, he stood still for a moment, allowing the crowd's cheers to wash over him. Then, he raised his arms, an almost ethereal presence as he spoke. "My quest for equality began many years ago." Amon's voice was steady, powerful, and it sent a ripple through the crowd. It was a voice that commanded respect. He continued, "When I was a boy, my family and I lived on a small farm. We weren't rich, and none of us were benders. This made us easy targets for the firebender who extorted my father." Amon paused, and Naruto felt a flicker of empathy for him, despite knowing how dangerous this man was. "One day, my father confronted this man. But when he did, that firebender took my family away from me." Amon's words caused gasps to ripple through the crowd, and even Naruto felt a pang of sympathy. "And then he took my face," Amon's voice dropped, as if the memory alone was enough to bring pain to the surface. The crowd fell silent. "I've been forced to hide behind this mask ever since." Naruto exchanged a look with Korra and Mako. They couldn't help but feel conflicted. Amon's words stirred something within them, but they knew better than to trust a man like this. Amon's voice rose again, more powerful than before. "As you know, the Avatar has recently arrived in Republic City. And if she were here, she would tell you that bending brings balance to the world. But she is wrong." Amon's tone grew sharper, his words filled with conviction. "The only thing bending has brought is suffering." The audience erupted in agreement, a chorus of voices that echoed through the warehouse. Naruto could feel the hate growing, and he tensed, his hand subtly moving to his kunai. It has been the cause for every war in every era, Amon continued, his words striking a chord with the crowd. But that is about to change. I know you've all been wondering, what is the revelation? Well, you are about to get your answer. The three of them exchanged a worried glance, the weight of Amon's words sinking in. The unease Naruto had felt before only deepened. Amon raised his arms again, his eyes lifting toward the ceiling as he spoke with an almost fanatical fervor. Since the beginning of time, the spirits have acted as guardians of our world, and they have spoken to me. They say the Avatar has failed humanity. Anger flashed in Korra's eyes, but Amon continued undeterred. That is why the spirits have chosen me to usher in a new era of balance. They have granted me a power that will make equality a reality. A pause, the tension in the room grew unbearable. The power to take a person's bending away. Amon declared, his voice reverberating through the warehouse. Permanently. The crowd gasped in shock, whispers rippled through the sea of people, and Naruto's stomach twisted. He had heard of this kind of power before, but to see it come from a man like Amon, it was chilling. As the whispers spread, Naruto's mind raced. He knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Amon and his followers weren't just looking for change. They were planning something far more dangerous. Korra clenched her fists, her fury palpable, along with her fear. She might not have been as quick to understand everything Amon had just revealed, but she knew one thing for sure: this man was hiding something, and sitting here waiting for it was getting on her nerves. Now, for a demonstration, Amon called out, his voice cold and commanding as several chi blockers brought the triple threats, along with Bolin, up to the stands. There he is, Korra said quickly, her eyes locking onto Bolin. She moved to rush forward, but Mako and Naruto both grabbed her arms, halting her. What? Korra protested, confusion crossing her face as she turned to them. Mako gave her a serious, steady look. We can't just rush in, we won't be able to take them all, so we need a plan. Before Korra could respond, one of the chi blockers shoved a large man forward, a towering figure dressed in a purple, expensive suit. This is Lightning Bolt Zult, Amon announced, gesturing toward the man. He will be my demonstration. But, to be fair, I will allow him to fight for his bending. The chi blockers stepped back, releasing Zult, who straightened up and glared at Amon. A smirk tugged at his lips as he sized up the leader of the Equalists. You shouldn't have done that, pal, Zult taunted, before launching a fireball straight at Amon. Amon dodged the fireball with ease, sidestepping it while continuing his slow approach toward Zult. The crowd murmured in awe as Amon effortlessly avoided a second fireball, his movements smooth and calculated. Zult's expression shifted from arrogance to frustration. His hands crackled with lightning, and he shot a bolt directly at Amon. But again, Amon nimbly dodged, his focus unwavering. With a swift motion, Amon closed the distance, grabbing Zult's arm and twisting it upward, forcing the lightning to follow his lead. The power crackled violently, but Amon remained calm. Amon placed his other hand on Zult's forehead, his fingers pressing into the skin. The chi blocker's eyes twitched as pain visibly rippled through him, but not a single scream left his mouth. Instead, the lightning seemed to flicker and distort, slowly turning into fire, which eventually dissipated. When Amon finally let go, Zult collapsed to the ground, weak and disoriented. He tried to push himself up, summoning what little strength he had left to throw a weak fire blast, but it fizzled out before it could even reach Amon. My bending, what did you do to me? Zult gasped, struggling to keep his balance as he lay on the floor, his face contorted in disbelief. Amon's voice was cold and final. I took it away. Forever. Korra was the first to freeze up, her eyes widening in what could only be seen as fear. Her mouth laid opened, her mind a blank, but as quickly as she became like this, she just as quickly became normal. With an urgent turn to Mako, she gave a worried and questioning look. "Okay, team leader, what do we do now?" Korra's voice was tinged with uncertainty, but Naruto could feel the fear that still lingered in her tone. Before Mako could respond, the chi blockers were already pushing forward another bender for the demonstration. The pressure was mounting, and Naruto could feel it. The need to act was urgent. His mind raced as he assessed the situation. The best way out, the quickest escape, was to unleash his full power. That would get them out safely, and fast. But that meant putting Korra and Mako in danger if anything went wrong. They were too exposed here, he had to make sure they stayed safe. Naruto turned to Korra and Mako, his voice low but firm. "You two stay back, I'll handle this." Korra's eyes widened, stepping forward, clearly ready to protest. "No way, you're not doing this alone, Naruto." But Naruto wasn't backing down. "It's too dangerous, I don't want either of you caught up in this. I can handle it, you'll be safer if you stay out of the way." Mako crossed his arms, looking at Naruto with a mixture of concern and frustration. "You're not going to take this on by yourself. We're a team, remember?" Naruto's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "I can't risk both of you getting hurt, just trust me, I'll get you out, I'm doing this alone." Korra's gaze softened for a moment, before she straightened up, a fire in her eyes. "You don't get to make this decision alone." She turned to Mako, who gave a small nod. "We'll stick together, we're not leaving anyone behind." Naruto's heart sank as he realized what they were doing. Korra and Mako weren't just his teammates, they were his friends, he admitted as much now. They didn't want to be left behind, and it hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. It wasn't about him. He'd never had anyone else to rely on before, not really. But this, what he had lost for so long, was different. And they weren't going to let him carry the burden by himself. Korra gave him a determined look, her voice steady. "We'll make a plan, together." Naruto stood there for a moment, staring at her and Mako. The weight of the decision felt heavier now. A part of him wanted to protest again, to push them away for their own safety, but another part, one he wasn't quite ready to face, told him it was okay. He didn't have to do this alone anymore. He let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly as the walls he'd built up over the years began to crack. "Fine," he muttered, almost to himself. "But if anything happens to you too, we're not letting that happen," Mako interjected firmly. "Let's get Bolin out of here." Naruto nodded silently, still feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but it wasn't as heavy now. Maybe he could rely on them. The blonde turned back to the stage, his mind racing as another bender lost their abilities. His gaze shifted to a steam pump tucked away near the edge of the warehouse, out of place, yet conveniently positioned. "All right, I've got a plan," Naruto said, turning to Mako and Korra. "Korra, get to the back, there's a steam pump there, use it to create a cover for me and Mako." Korra gave a firm nod before slipping away, leaving Naruto and Mako to wait. As more benders fell to Amon's power, their anxiety grew. Bolin was next in line, and the two were on edge, scanning the warehouse for any sign of Korra's success. Had something gone wrong? Had she been caught? No, Naruto pushed the thought aside. She could handle herself. Just as doubt started creeping in, a thick cloud of steam flooded the room. Taking their chance, Naruto and Mako bolted forward, grabbing Bolin and pulling him away from the stage. "Naruto, Mako, I love you guys," Bolin managed to say, barely able to process what was happening before they dragged him into the shadows. With the cover of steam and the chaos unfolding, their escape went smoother than expected, almost too smooth. As they disappeared into the night, a lingering thought gnawed at Naruto. Did they really get away that easily, or were they allowed to? Still, for now, there was only relief. They had Bolin, and that was all that mattered. Time skip. The moon hung high in the night sky, its silver glow casting soft light over the training ground. A crisp breeze whispered through the air, carrying with it the faint rustling of leaves and the occasional burst of laughter. Near the steps of the temple, Naruto sat cross-legged, a wide grin on his face as he balanced a small ball of swirling chakra on his fingertip. Ikki and Milo watched with wide, sparkling eyes, their giggles breaking the peaceful silence. "Now, watch closely," Naruto said, shifting the chakra sphere from one finger to the next, letting it flicker between his hands like a playful firefly. "This takes years of practice, but lucky for you guys, I'm a natural genius." Milo gasped, "Whoa, do you think I can do that?" Naruto chuckled, "Maybe when you're older, squirt, but how about this?" With a quick motion, he flicked the sphere forward, letting it dissolve into a harmless puff of blue light right before Milo's nose. The young airbender yelped before breaking into delighted laughter, while Ikki clapped excitedly. Do it again," she begged, bouncing on her toes. As Naruto indulged them with another trick. His attention drifted toward the training grounds. A few yards away, Korra stood alone, her stance rigid, her arms outstretched in front of her. The flickering glow of nearby lanterns cast long shadows as she took a deep breath and thrust her hands forward. Nothing. She huffed in frustration, shaking her arms out before trying again. The cool night air swirled gently around her, but no matter how much she focused, how much she willed it, the wind refused to answer her call. Naruto's smile faltered for a brief second. He could see it, the tight set of her jaw, the way her shoulders tensed with barely restrained irritation. She was pushing herself, growing more frustrated with each failed attempt. Ikki and Milo's laughter brought him back, and he turned to them with another grin, but his mind lingered on Korra. He knew that feeling all too well. She was frustrated, sure, but that wasn't why she went back to tea forcing the air. No, she was afraid of what she had seen Amon do, even if she wouldn't admit it. After saving Bolin, what happened to Zult and the other triads, it had gotten to her. For now, he let her be. He knew she was too stubborn to accept help so easily. But maybe, when she was ready, he'd be there to remind her she wasn't alone in this. "Naruto, what else can you do?" Ikki asked, her and Milo's laughter snapping him back to the present. He turned to the siblings, flashing his usual grin as he sheepishly scratched the back of his head. "I can do a lot, really. To be honest, I don't even know what I can't do. But I think that's enough for today," he said, thinking of all the skills he had as a shinobi. Ikki's face fell into a pout, and in perfect sync, Milo mimicked her expression. Naruto raised a brow, about to ask why they were making such faces when Ikki huffed. "Show us what else you can do, as a shinobi." "Yeah," Milo chimed in. Naruto chuckled at the attempt. "It's shinobi, but if that's too hard, just call me a ninja," he smirked. "Alright, one last trick, then it's bedtime." Their pouts instantly vanished, replaced by eager grins as they focused on him, eyes wide with anticipation. Thinking of something to really impress them, Naruto decided on the transformation jutsu. It wasn't elemental, so it would be unlike anything they'd ever seen. With a quick hand sign and a puff of smoke, Ikki and Milo suddenly found themselves staring at themselves. Their jaws dropped. "No way," Ikki gasped. Milo let out a high-pitched battle cry and launched himself at his copy, kicking off a chaotic game of chase. Ikki quickly followed, giggling as she tried to tag her clone. Begrudgingly, Naruto played along, running with his double as the kids darted after them. Lost in the fun, he didn't notice how close he was getting to Korra, until a familiar static-filled voice cut through the night. "Good evening, my fellow equalists. This is your leader, Amon." Naruto immediately dispelled the jutsu, his clone vanishing in a puff of smoke, while his stomach twisted. He turned toward the sound, spotting Korra a few feet away, frozen. A single bead of sweat trailed down her neck as she stared at the small radio on a nearby table. "As you have heard," Amon's voice continued, calm yet chilling, "the Republic Council has voted to make me public enemy number 1, proving once again that the bending oppressors of this city will stop at nothing to quash our revolution. But we cannot be stopped. Our numbers grow stronger by the day. You no longer have to live in fear. The time has come for benders to experience fear." The transmission cut to static. A heavy silence followed. Naruto clenched his fists, his jaw tightening at the weight of Amon's words. But his frustration faded the second he looked back at Korra. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. She was trapped in her own mind. Reliving that night, watching helplessly as Amon stripped a man of his bending, as if it were nothing. Naruto exhaled, glancing at Ikki and Milo still nearby. With a small nod, he motioned for them to go inside. Ikki hesitated but obeyed, pulling Milo along with her. Once they were gone, Naruto stepped toward Korra, careful not to startle her. The moment his foot crunched against the dirt, her breath hitched. She was spiraling. He could see it, the way her hands clenched at her sides, the slight tremble in her shoulders. Without thinking, he closed the distance and pulled her into a firm embrace. Korra stiffened. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then, slowly, her ragged inhales steadied against his chest. Naruto didn't say anything. He just held her, letting her know he was there. After a moment, her awareness returned. The warmth of his arms, the steady rise and fall of his breathing, she suddenly realized just how close they were. Her face burned, the heat spread all the way to her ears. Quickly, she shoved him back, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, almost accusatory, but her blush was impossible to miss, even under the moonlight. Naruto blinked at her, tilting his head. "What, you looked like you were freaking out, so I stopped you." Korra crossed her arms, turning away. "I wasn't freaking out," she muttered. Naruto snorted, "Yeah, sure. And I totally didn't just carry you like a baby back from practice." Korra whipped around, eyes narrowing. "That was different, I was unconscious." Naruto smirked, "And this time, you were panicking, same thing." She opened her mouth to argue but quickly shut it, her scowl deepening. "Whatever." Naruto chuckled, shaking his head. "You know, you don't always have to act tough." Korra shot him a glare, "I am tough." He grinned, "I know you are. But even tough people need a break sometimes." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, with a quiet exhale, she turned back toward the radio, her expression softer. "I just hate feeling helpless." Naruto glanced at the radio, then back at her, "You're not." Korra looked at him, meeting his gaze. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to cheer her up just to make her feel better. He meant it. Her chest tightened. "Thanks," she mumbled. Naruto grinned, "Anytime." After a few minutes, the two finally turned off the radio and made their way inside for dinner. Naruto already knew what was on the menu, he had helped Pema make it. After all, ramen didn't exist in Republic City, and that was a problem he had to fix. Seriously. How had no one here ever heard of it? It was the food of the gods. And while he enjoyed Pema's cooking, he wasn't sure how long he could survive without his favorite dish. Flashback, earlier that day. Hey, Pema, I got a question. Pema turned from the counter, wiping her hands on her apron as she glanced at the blonde standing behind her. Of course, Naruto, what is it? He crossed his arms, his expression serious. Why don't you guys have ramen here? Pema blinked. Ramen? Yeah, you know, warm, delicious noodles in broth, topped with all sorts of good stuff. The greatest meal to ever exist? Pema let out a light laugh. I'm afraid I've never heard of it. Naruto gasped, his eyes wide with betrayal. Wah, how, that's just wrong. Pema shook her head, amused. I take it you're a fan? Naruto nodded vigorously, more than a fan, ramen is life, I need it. Pema hummed in thought before smiling, well, if you can teach me how to make it, I'd be happy to give it a try. Naruto's face lit up, really, you do that? Of course. It sounds like it's important to you. Naruto grinned. Pema, you're the best, I swear, by the time I'm done. You're gonna love ramen as much as I do. Back to present. Naruto smirked as he stepped into the dining area, the familiar scent of broth and noodles filling the air. He couldn't help but feel proud. Tonight, Republic City would finally be introduced to true culinary perfection. Naruto took a seat beside Korra, grinning in anticipation as he sat cross-legged on the soft pad beneath him. Everyone but Pema had gathered around the table. Tenzin and Jinora sat with calm composure, while Ikki and Milo looked as if they were moments away from starving. Or at least acting like it. The moment the food was placed on the table, Tenzin's brows furrowed slightly in confusion. Still. He said nothing, choosing instead to begin the evening's prayer. We are grateful for this delicious food, for happiness, for compassion, and, a new voice cut through the air, halting Tenzin mid-sentence. Naruto immediately felt his mood sour. Who the hell interrupts the greatness of ramen? He didn't care if he was supposed to be keeping a low profile, anyone who disrespected this moment deserved to get smacked around. If it came down to it, he'd use Kurama's avatar form and make them understand. I'm not interrupting, am I? All eyes turned toward the speaker, a tall water tribe man with 3 ponytails. He was dressed sharply in dark blue pants and a matching button-up shirt, layered with an open light blue and white jacket. The man gave a respectful bow, but Tenzin's expression hardened. There was a clear familiarity between them, yet beneath it, Naruto caught an undercurrent of something else, resentment. This is my home, Tarlok. We're about to eat dinner, Tenzin said, his tone firm as he rose to his feet. Good, because I am absolutely famished, Tarlok replied smoothly. Tenzin's scowl deepened, but before he could refuse, Tarlok continued, his voice casual yet pointed. Airbenders never turn away a hungry guest. Am I right? Naruto immediately recognized what was happening. The guy was manipulating Tenzin, twisting air nomad philosophy to get what he wanted. Shady. That meant he was here for a reason, but Naruto had no idea what it was. Who even is this guy? Tenzin let out a tired sigh, glancing briefly at Pema, whose pointed glare carried all the weight of a wife's unspoken words. With a small shrug of defeat, he relented. I suppose you're right. Satisfied, Tarlok strode forward, settling himself on the other side of Korra. Immediately, Naruto felt a shift in the man's demeanor. The cunning, playful edge he had just moments ago softened into something more charming. It was subtle. But Naruto caught it, and it only made him more suspicious. Still, he held his tongue, choosing to watch for now. Tarlok, the Northern Water Tribe representative's introduction to Korra was met with polite indifference on her part. She bowed briefly before returning her attention to her ramen, offering only the most basic pleasantry in response. Naruto smirked. She clearly wasn't falling for whatever game this guy was playing. Then came Ikki's bluntness, cutting through the tense air like a kunai. "Why do you have 3 ponytails?" she asked, leaning over the table, nose wrinkling. "And how come you smell like a lady? You're weird." Naruto had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. He shot a glance at Tenzin, who pinched the bridge of his nose, probably regretting every life decision that led to this moment. Tarlok, however, recovered quickly, masking any irritation with a forced chuckle. "Well, aren't you precocious?" he replied before turning back to Korra, ignoring Ikki's continued glare. "So, I've been reading all about your adventures in the papers. Infiltrating Amon's rally, now that took some real initiative." Naruto's smirk faded. He didn't like how this guy was already buttering Korra up. Korra, though, seemed to appreciate the acknowledgement. "Oh, thanks. I think you're the first authority figure in the city who's happy I'm here. Republic City is much better off now that you've arrived," Tarlok continued smoothly. Naruto's eyes narrowed. There it is. Compliment after compliment, laying the foundation for whatever it was he really wanted. Tenzin, ever the protective mentor, finally stepped in. "Enough with the flattery, Tarlok, what do you want from Korra?" Tarlok barely blinked at the interruption. "Patience, Tenzin, I'm getting to that." He turned back to Korra with a measured smile. "As you may have heard, I am assembling a task force that will strike at the heart of the revolution. And I want you to join me." Naruto's hand twitched. Korra blinked. "Really?" Tenzin was just as surprised. "What?" Tarlok nodded. "I need someone who will help me attack Amon directly, someone fearless in the face of danger. And that someone is you." Naruto glanced at Korra. He knew how much the whole Amon situation weighed on her. Would she really jump at this? But then, to his surprise, she shook her head. "Join your task force, I can't." Both Tenzin and Tarlok stared at her in disbelief. "I must admit," Tarlok said, voice calm but eyes sharp with interest, "I'm rather surprised. I thought you'd jump at the chance to help me lead the charge against Amon." Tenzin muttered, "Me too." Korra took a sip of her drink. "I came to Republic City to finish my avatar training with Tenzin. Right now, I just need to focus on that." Naruto felt something loosen in his chest. Korra had her priorities straight. Tarlok, however, wasn't about to give up. "Which is why this opportunity is perfect. You would get on-the-job experience while performing your avatar duty for the city." Tenzin's expression hardened. "Korra gave you her answer, it's time for you to go." Tarlok sighed dramatically. As if deeply disappointed. "Very well." He stood, but not before giving Korra one last look, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "But I'm not giving up on you just yet," he wagged a finger at her, "you'll be hearing from me soon." Naruto clenched his jaw. "I don't like this guy." Tarlok bowed. "It has been a pleasure, Avatar Korra," before making his way toward the door. Ikki, never missing an opportunity, waved enthusiastically. "Bye-bye Ponytail Man." Tarlok's polite mask cracked just slightly as he let out a small grunt of distaste before disappearing from sight. As soon as the door shut, Naruto exhaled, shoulders dropping. "I really don't like that guy." Korra poked at her ramen. "Yeah, I don't know what it is, but something about him feels off." "Trust your gut," Naruto said. Politicians like him always got an angle. Tenzin nodded in agreement, but Korra just sighed, staring down at her bowl. Naruto decided to change the mood. He leaned back, stretching his arms over his head with a satisfied grin. Anyway, let's stop talking about that guy and focus on something important, like how good this ramen is. Korra blinked, then raised a brow. Since when did you get so obsessed with these noodles? Naruto gasped, placing a hand over his chest as if personally offended. Obsessed? Korra, this isn't an obsession, it's a way of life. Jinora chuckled, while Ikki and Milo were too busy stuffing their faces. Korra smirked, shaking her head. Sure. Naruto grinned, leaning forward on his elbows. You have no idea, just ask Pema. The rest of the night passed quickly, with Naruto leaving his room around midnight to sleep. The large tree in the front of the island reminded him of Konoha, and every so often, he would sleep in its branches, waking up either perched among the leaves or sprawled on the island floor. But before he could head toward the tree, the sound of soft sobs caught his attention. Naruto paused, listening closely as the sadness in the air settled over him. His brows furrowed. At this hour, there was only one person he expected to be awake. Moving quietly, he followed the sound, walking up the temple wall until he reached the roof. There, bathed in the pale moonlight, sat Korra, her shoulders trembling as she wiped at her eyes. For a moment, she didn't notice him. But as he stepped closer, the shifting tiles beneath his feet alerted her, and she quickly turned to face him. "Why are you up here?" Korra whispered, hastily wiping her tears. Naruto didn't answer right away, instead taking in the way she looked, vulnerable, tense, trying to mask her emotions. After a few seconds, he finally spoke, unaware of how the sound of his voice seemed to calm her. "I could ask you the same thing," he said with a small smile before sitting beside her. Silence settled between them. For a moment, neither spoke, but Naruto could feel Korra's unease creeping back in, thick and suffocating. He didn't want that. So, with a flick of his wrist, he formed a Rasengan in his palm, letting the swirling sphere of energy hum softly in the night air. Korra's eyes instinctively followed it, watching the chakra twist and pulse, small bursts of energy sparking off its surface. Only when he was sure she wouldn't fall back into her tears did Naruto finally speak again. "I heard you up here," he admitted. "That's why I came, I wanted to make sure my friend was okay." Korra turned to him, searching his face as if looking for something, reassurance, maybe. Then, she sighed, swiping away another stray tear before looking away. "I came up here because," she hesitated, an uncomfortable look crossing her face. "I had a nightmare. About Amon. He infiltrated the island, found my room, and," she swallowed hard, "he took my bending away." She shivered at the thought, her body tensing as she relived the dream. Naruto frowned, his mind turning over her words. Was this why she had refused Tarlok's offer? It wasn't a stretch to assume as much. But if that was the case, it meant she had been hiding how she truly felt about everything. His expression darkened as he turned to her. "Is that why you didn't take Tarlok's offer?" His voice was neutral, but there was an edge to it. "No way," Korra replied instantly, but her eyes betrayed her. Naruto sighed. "Korra," his tone was firm. "I can tell this is a big deal for you. I told you earlier, you're not alone in this." Korra sighed, frustration evident in her expression. She wished she could drown out his voice, but she knew he wouldn't let it go. "All right, yes," she admitted. "That's the reason I didn't want to join. I'm afraid of what Amon could do. He can take my bending away, Naruto, my bending is me. It's not something I want anyone to be able to take. And now, everywhere I go, I see him." It's not helping with the nightmares. I feel pathetic. Before she could say anything else, she suddenly felt strong arms wrap around her, pulling her into a firm embrace. Her breath hitched as her back pressed against his chest. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. A small blush crept onto her cheeks, and she gritted her teeth, torn between embarrassment and irritation. Naruto, why the hell are you hugging me? Naruto simply shrugged, resting his chin lightly atop her head. It worked last time, didn't it? I'm trying to make you feel better. Korra stiffened at first, caught off guard by the warmth of his embrace. Her mind screamed at her to push him away, to bark out some sarcastic remark, but she didn't. Instead, after a brief pause, she let out a slow breath and relaxed against him, the tension in her shoulders melting away. Her blush grew, brightening as she closed her eyes, feeling oddly safe in his arms. After a few moments of silence, she spoke. Hey, Naruto. She hesitated, then tilted her head slightly to glance at him. A week ago, when you were fighting those chi blockers, I saw you pull out those knives out of thin air. Her brows furrowed slightly. How did you do that? Naruto grinned lazily, lifting his left arm, letting her see the lean appendage up close. You mean these? Korra's eyes widened as she spotted 7 intricate seals inked into his forearm, each one humming faintly with energy, as one launched a kunai K to Naruto's hand. His smirk widened. I seal them away so I can summon them whenever I need them. Comes in handy when you don't want to carry a bunch of weapons all the time. She stared at his arm, her fingers twitching slightly with curiosity. So, you have more stuff stored in there? Naruto gave her a knowing grin but didn't answer, letting the mystery linger. Korra huffed but didn't push it. Instead, she let her gaze drift back to the stars. The night was quiet, and with Naruto's warmth keeping the chill away, she found her eyelids growing heavy. Before she realized it, sleep crept in, and her body naturally leaned further into him. Naruto blinked, glancing down as he felt her weight shift against him. A soft chuckle left his lips as he adjusted slightly, letting her rest against his chest more comfortably. Guess we're sleeping here tonight, he muttered with a small smile, closing his own eyes. The night passed in peaceful silence, the two resting beneath the moonlit sky. As the first light of dawn settled over the temple, Milo and Ikki were already up to their usual antics, with Jinora keeping a watchful eye on them. The siblings had noticed something unusual on their morning rounds. Naruto and Korra still fast asleep on the temple roof, the blonde's arms loosely draped around the avatar. Naturally, this was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. Look at them, Ikki whispered excitedly. They're all cuddled up like a pair of turtle ducks. Milo snickered. Naruto's got a girlfriend. Jinora sighed, though even she couldn't help but smile. We should probably wake them up before they roll off the roof. Ikki cupped her hands around her mouth and took a deep breath. Wake up, love birds, she yelled, her voice screeching past the whole island. Naruto groaned as his eyes fluttered open, the shout rattling his brain. Korra jolted awake, immediately realizing how close she was to Naruto and quickly pushed him away. What the? Naruto blinked blearily at the trio standing a few feet away. All grinning at them. What's wrong with you guys? Ikki giggled, we should be asking you that, you two were sleeping all cuddled up. Korra scowled, face burning as she got to her feet, it wasn't like that. Naruto yawned, scratching his head. Yeah, I was just making sure she was okay. He stretched, completely unfazed, you guys are weird. Jinora shook her head, amusement clear on her face, come on, breakfast is ready. Just like that, the day had started, though by Naruto's standards, it was boring. The first few days after he arrived had been exciting, if you didn't count him on, but now, things were settling into a routine. Airbending training, Tarlok trying to win Korra over with extravagant gifts, more training, forced meditation, and another round of gifts before the day ended. At least Korra wasn't having nightmares anymore. Though, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with him helping her sleep every so often. Not that it meant anything, he'd do this for any of his friends, right? If it were Bolin or even Mako freaking out, he'd probably do the same. Well, maybe not the hugging part. But Korra needed comfort, and that's what friends were for. Still, nothing interesting was happening. They had even skipped a few pro-bending training sessions with Mako and Bolin. At this rate, he might need to pick up a hobby before the week ended without any action. Naruto scowled and opened his eyes, fed up with sitting still in the open courtyard of the temple, doing practically nothing. Meditation wasn't something he understood, not by a long shot. He glanced at his company. Korra and the air nomad siblings were lined up next to him, all deep in meditation. Even Milo, somehow, which made no sense whatsoever. "Why are we doing this again?" Naruto suddenly asked, his voice breaking the silence. Tenzin remained composed, though the slight movement of his lips showed he had been expecting the interruption. Meditation calms the mind, an airbender must find peace in even the most trying times. However, I also meditate whenever I need to think through something. Naruto sighed, resting his head on his hand with a smirk. "I don't know why I let you force me into this," he muttered, his tone teasing. Tenzin raised an eyebrow but kept his eyes closed. "Really, I would have expected you of all people to appreciate meditation. You're well-rested, energetic, yet controlled. You carry yourself freely, like an airbender." Naruto shook his head, more to himself than anything. "Nope, I'm like this for a lot of reasons, and none of them involve meditation." At this, Korra and the siblings cracked open an eye, watching the two quietly. Tenzin furrowed his brows slightly before continuing. Tenzin took a moment, likely to study Naruto, sensing that there was more behind his words than the blonde was letting on. He'd seemed intrigued but also aware that pushing too hard would get him nowhere. "I see," Tenzin would say, his voice calm but thoughtful. "Then tell me, what is it that keeps you so balanced?" Naruto would scoff, leaning back on his hands. "Balance? I don't think about stuff like that. I just keep moving forward, that's all there is to it." Korra, still watching, would smirk slightly. "That doesn't sound very airbender-like." Naruto would grin. "Good, I'm not trying to be an airbender." Ikki, always curious, would chime in, "So what are you trying to be?" Naruto would pause, glancing at the sky. For a moment, he'd consider his answer. "Just me," he'd finally say, "that's all I need to be." Tenzin would hum in thought before finally opening his eyes. A simple answer. But not without wisdom. He'd glance at his students and then at Korra. "Perhaps we should continue meditation another time." Milo would immediately cheer. "Finally, I thought I was gonna turn into a statue." Nora would sigh. "That's not how meditation works, Milo." As the group began to stir from their seated positions, Korra would glance at Naruto. "You really can't sit still for more than 5 minutes, huh?" Naruto would stretch his arms over his head, grinning. "Nope, sitting around and thinking too much just isn't my thing." "Then what is your thing?" she'd ask, teasing. Naruto would think for a moment before flashing a mischievous grin. "Causing trouble." Korra would chuckle, shaking her head. "Yeah, I figured." With that, the morning would move on, leading into whatever was next, but quickly he decided to break away from the routine that they were building. He was tired of it, and besides, his idea was a lot better anyway. Naruto ended up leading Ikki Milo and Jinora near the front of Air Temple Island, with prospects of seeing his abilities while watching him train. Of course Korra follows as well, and he wasn't gonna tell her off. While he would hide a lot of what he could do, this was just basic training, only scratching the surface of each ability he had. Plus, at some point the whole island would know the truth of his past. Kurama was right when saying he couldn't keep himself quiet for too long. Hell, he wouldn't be surprised if a year passed, and all of Republic City knew who he was. If that did ever happen, he would probably stay low for a few weeks, at least until his hype calmed down. Note, I'm going to end it here since episode 4 has a lot of back and forth, with Mako starting to date Asami and Korra joining Tarlok's task force. Most of it will follow canon. Korra, Naruto, and most of the others, including Bolin, Asami, and Mako, attend Tarlok's gala. The Fire Ferrets have Asami's father as a sponsor, allowing them to join the championships. As in the show, Korra joins the task force after some pressure, with Naruto warning her against it. She takes his advice into account, but the entire city is pushing her to go after Amon, so she proceeds anyway. Eventually, Korra confronts Amon but is saved by Naruto. However, she doesn't have a major breakdown since she had already confided in Naruto about her fear of Amon. The Fire Ferrets are allowed 4 players, but one of them, likely Korra, will need to switch out every so often to keep it fair. Once I'm done with part 3, we'll move on to episode 5. No spoilers for what might happen, but if you know episode 5, you'll already have an idea of what's coming. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all KAGE, out.